Germany is known for the quality of its research. While going for a PhD, one often faces a dilemma between PhD at a university and a PhD in the industry. I'm your host Paras Mehta, and today on India to Germany, we speak with Dr. Ajay Pai about PhD in the industry in Germany and how it differs from a PhD in academia. Ajay is working as a senior staff application engineer at Infineon Technologies in Munich. Infineon Technologies was also the industrial partner in his PhD in the area of automotive power electronics. Prior to that, he did his master's at RWTH Aachen University and his bachelor's at NIT Karnataka in India. Welcome, Ajay. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Paras. It's definitely my pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me here.
Thanks. So, Ajay, today we are going to discuss the topic of PhD, specifically industrial PhD. But before we do that, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes, of course. Hi, my name is Ajay Pai. So I did my bachelor's in technology from NITK Surathkal back in 2010. And after that, I came to Germany for my master's from RWTH Aachen in 2014. So since then, I have been working as an application engineer at Infineon Technologies in Munich. And my focus is power semiconductors for e-mobility applications. Meanwhile, I also did an industrial PhD from Friedrich Alexander University, Erlangen, or the University of Erlangen. And this was supported by my employer, Infineon.
Right. Okay. So after that, you would then just continued working at Infineon.
Yes.
Okay, that's already a good start. Okay. So, yeah, maybe then you could tell us a little bit about what is an industrial PhD.
Yes. So maybe Paras, I would like to give first a bit of a background. First of all, there are two streams of or two forms of PhDs in Germany or also outside Germany. So one is the so-called structured PhD, which includes systematic coursework, and the topic is generally well defined. This is the type of PhD which we find typically in English speaking countries, also in India, for example, where there is a defined coursework. The topic is quite well defined and the path is also quite well defined.
Okay.
So this is the first type of PhD, and the second is the so-called individual PhD, and this typically involves no coursework. And as one might, guess from the name, here the individual is responsible for the path of the PhD and also for the topic of the dissertation. So I must also say that this is the most common type of PhD in Germany. This is changing, but today this is the most common type of PhD.
Okay.
So, coming now to your question regarding industrial PhD, so this is a type of individual PhD where the candidate is not really based in the university, but rather in a company and is researching on a topic which is interesting to the company. And from the funding point of view, also the candidate is funded by the company. So this is in a nutshell an industrial PhD.
Okay. So yeah, structured PhD is like what you see. I remember seeing it in the UK. You have like 4 years. In the first year, you do some coursework, and then the rest of the years, you already have a kind of a well-defined path for your PhD. Right? That's
Yes,
structured PhD.
yes, absolutely. That's right.
Okay, but usually an industrial PhD is an individual PhD.
Yes, in most cases, this is an individual PhD, because normally the expectation in a structural PhD is that the candidate is attending classes, taking courses, taking or organizing exams, correcting papers, and this normally needs that the candidate is based in the university. And however, in an industrial PhD, the candidate is usually based in a company. And in my case, for example, I was based in Munich, whereas the university is in Erlangen. So there's a quite a bit of distance, which means I cannot be in the university on a regular basis. So this
Okay.
is why industrial PhDs tend to be individual PhDs.
All right. So you were spending most of your time at the company, you were on their premises.
Yes, that's right.
All right.
Yes.
So the typical type of PhD, I mean, at least in my head, is the one that you just said is the one which you do at the university. So this academic PhD.
Yes.
Um, so in what respects does an industrial PhD differ from an academic PhD?
Yes. Yeah, so that's a very relevant question. So, in an academic PhD, so the candidate is normally, like I said, based in the university, and he performs research on a topic that is usually aligned with some specific institute of that university. And these candidates are normally either funded by the university, or they are funded from a scholarship, like a government or a private scholarship. But in an industrial PhD, the candidate is typically a full-time employee of a company, which means he or she is 100% of the time at the company, but has to work on a topic which is, of course, along the lines of interest of the company, and is usually also funded by the company. So this is the main difference from academic PhD. And moreover, industrial topics are normally more, let's say, applied research oriented, and they're focusing mostly on topics like technology, or application or production, which is interesting for the companies.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense.
However, yeah, however, academic PhDs tend to be more, yeah, of course, from the name, academic, and also highly scientific, in contrast to industrial PhDs.
Yeah. Okay.
And one more point is, if you look at academic PhDs, normally the flexibility is higher in the choice of topics, because universities typically have a wide range of interest or research topics.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, whereas on the other hand, the industrial PhD, it has to be restricted to the topic of the company.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. And when when I do an industrial PhD, I am registered as a PhD student or a promotions student at the university.
Yes, that's right.
All right.
Yes.
So I also get like a supervising professor at the
Yes. Yes.
university.
Yes. So normally, only a university can award a doctoral degree. So the companies, even though they support and fund the PhDs, they cannot really uh, award a degree. Only the universities can do it. And there also has to be a so-called supervising professor. So in German, it's called a Doctor Vater, or a Doctor Mutter. So doctoral father or a doctoral mother. Yeah, and it's necessary in order to get a PhD, that a university is awarding this, and there is a supervising professor assigned to this.
All right. And the
Yes.
supervising professor, he does not have any relationship with the company. He or she is just a normal professor working at the university.
Yes, yes, that's right. So normally, yeah. So normally, companies, German companies are, especially companies which are in the high tech technology sector, they tend to have very close relationships with universities and research institutions. So from that point of view, they have some sort of uh, contact with universities, and they might have some kind of research partnerships with the professors. But you're right. I mean, the professors need not have any kind of link to the company.
All right. Okay. So, and the choosing the professor, I have to do that myself, or does the company do that for me?
Yes. So normally, the company expects that a candidate who's starting an industrial PhD, he is sort of a, contact partner for partnerships with universities, or research institutions. From that point of view, they would like that the industrial PhD candidate takes the initiative to set up a contact with the professor, and also um, align with the professor for potentially supervising his or her thesis. But nevertheless, like I said, because companies tend to have very good relationship with the universities, right? It is also likely that they already know some professors who are working in the same topic and who might be willing to support the thesis. So to summarize, normally the candidate, it's good if the candidate can find a supervisor of their own, but the companies also usually help them.
Okay, yeah, of course they have had experience with this with the previous candidates as well. So yeah, and they also, you said they also have contacts at the university usually.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and you mentioned thesis.
Mhm.
So of course, normally when you do a PhD at the university, you have to write a thesis at the end, and then this thesis is evaluated. So is this also the case with an industrial PhD?
Yes, precisely. So in Germany, or a fundamental requirement of a PhD is that thesis is published. So this applies for academic PhDs as well as for industrial PhDs. So a thesis has to be published for the thesis to be for the PhD degree to be awarded.
Okay, all right. But one thing that I then think about is I'm writing a thesis about something that has to do with the company. So first of all, what I write as a part of the PhD, do I also own the rights for this, or does the company own the rights for this?
Yeah, this is a very good question. So normally, because the PhD, inherently has the requirement to publish the thesis, the companies normally don't, or the companies are very supportive in the candidates publishing the thesis, because this is a fundamental requirement for the doctoral degree. However, one must keep in mind that companies try to protect their intellectual rights and intellectual properties for obvious reasons, and from that point of view, they can, for example, uh, withhold publishing certain intellectual property related topics. For example, if there is a patent, or if there is a new product developed, or if there is a new technology developed, then of course the company is the key holder of this of these intellectual properties. Of course, the PhD candidate might also have a certain share in it, but the fundamental holder is the company.
Okay. And then whether I can use a piece of work and put it in my PhD, or whether I'm not allowed to do this because this is too confidential or so for the company. This is the decision of the company in the end.
Yes, that's right. So normally, yeah. So the companies could prevent some parts of the thesis from being published, but I think when the candidate is already working on the topic, and the candidate is already in the company, I think it's also the duty of the candidate to be in regular touch with his supervisors to make sure that there is not a topic which might be potentially contradictory to the company's interests. So from that point of view, I think from a very early stage, the candidate has to make sure the topics are well defined, and in the end, it's possible to publish the thesis.
Mhm. And with respect to, let's say, the monetary aspect, so you already suggested that in the university, one can get funding through a project or through a scholarship, and usually in the industrial PhD, one can get paid by the company because one is an employee of the company. Uh, do you think financially it makes more sense, or is it better to do an industrial PhD because you earn more, or you are supported in a better way, or something like this?
Yes. So I would say, from the financial point of view, the difference is rather small. At least I would not base my decision on this, because the difference is really small. And also, when one is in the university, there are, like you rightly mentioned, there are two ways of financing the thesis. So one is with a scholarship, which is typically not as high as for a full-time job. But in
Mhm.
the university, it is also possible to do a project-based uh, contract where the candidates, in addition to their PhD work, they also have to support in research projects. And in this case, also the the salary could be as good as a full-time employee. So from that point of view, I think there is not that big of a difference whether one does a PhD in the university or in the industry.
All right. But do you see other benefits of doing an industrial PhD over an academic PhD?
Yes. So I think both forms of PhD have their own, let's say, pros and cons, of course. But industrial PhDs are, like I mentioned, they are more applied, or they're more practical and industry oriented.
Okay.
So this means the candidates have a very high level of contact with the industry experts, and the candidates are also exposed to technical trends and market trends, business relevance, all of this, right from an early stage of the PhD. So this means the candidates get a very holistic and business relevant understanding of their topic. So at the end, this makes the candidate an expert in his or her specialized field, and this is very interesting for the industry because the topics are normally industry relevant.
True. That's
So
true.
this means when the candidate is applying for a job after the PhD, for example, the PhD or the time that was spent during the PhD is usually considered as work experience.
Yes, that's true.
Yes, and because the topics were also very relevant for the industry, I think the candidates are at a higher chance of landing a good job after their PhD.
Okay.
So this, I think, is the main advantage of an industrial PhD. And of course, I mean, if someone has a clear direction to go to start a job, or to have pursue a career in a company after their PhD, then I think industrial PhD may be a good choice for them.
Okay. But if you want to pursue a career in academia, then maybe normal academic PhD might be better.
Yes, that's perfectly precise. So, in academic PhD, normally, the work is more, let's say, scientific and more sometimes more theoretical. This means the publications, or the nature of the publications could be, significantly different. And this means if the candidates want to do, for example, a postdoctoral project after at the end of their PhD, or start a career as a professor, from that point of view, I think it's best to go for an academic PhD.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and one additional thing regarding industrial PhD is that let's say 1 year down the PhD, or 1 year into the PhD, let's say the candidate figures out that okay, PhD is not my thing. Then because they're already in a company, it's very easy for them to find an alternate job in the company.
That's true. And also, since this time has already been also taken as work experience, so the time doesn't go waste for them.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, yeah, that's true. It's safer in that way. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And do you think there are some disadvantages of? So you already mentioned one, which is that it's maybe for a career in academia, it's not the most suited, and maybe
Yes.
it's less scientific
Yes.
and theoretical. Is there any other disadvantage?
Yeah. So one, let's say at least uh, one disadvantage that I can think of is that when a candidate is based in a company, he or she has very less contact to the university. This means very less contact to the professors, and also the candidate's peers in the university. So this is a sort of a bottleneck, because the candidate cannot follow as much the research happening in the university. So
Okay.
this is the downside. And also when let's say the candidate is finalizing the dissertation or the thesis at the end of the PhD, because the candidate does not have direct access to the university and to the professors. This can be a little, let's say, little challenging. I would not say it's a big major disadvantage, but this can be one of the challenging topics.
Okay, but not having access to one's peers at the university, yeah, do you think this is a big disadvantage in terms of like social exchange, or like you are a bit alone in the company, or how do you think that this is a
Yeah.
disadvantage?
So of course, when the candidate is not based in the university, for example, they cannot go out for lunch or for coffee with the professor or with their course researchers, so, or have some quick chat, meeting someone on the corridor. This does not happen when the candidate is not based in the university. This is the downside. But then in return for this, they, because the candidates are based in the industry, right, they can have this kind of chat, or this kind of exchange with their industrial peers.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's like it's like a trade off.
yeah. Of course, I mean the other people in the company are not doing PhDs, so maybe they're not in the same situation. But okay, yeah, they are not alone either.
Yes, yes,
That's true. That's
yes.
true.
Yeah, so if one is based in the university, then let's say the atmosphere is very conducive for a PhD.
Hmm.
Whereas
Yeah,
in a company, that may not be fully the case, because people there are doing a regular job, and maybe you are one of the 5% of the people who are actually doing a PhD within the company. So that would be a slight difference.
that's true. Yeah, very valid point. Yeah. So moving on to after the PhD, so I guess the one of the major main things would be that one could get a job at the same company later on. Um, how high are the chances to get a permanent position in the same organization after the industrial PhD?
Yes, uh, I would say the chances are really very, very high of the candidate converting a PhD contract into a full-time contract for several reasons. First reason is that because the candidate is already based in the company, right? He has a lot of contacts, maybe with the managers or technical leads or HR. So from that point of view, he has a much better visibility into the organization. Second thing is the candidate also knows the work culture of the company very well. So I think the candidate is also, from that point of view, very suitable and very desirable for the hiring managers, because they are already part of the organization. They know how the organization functions. This is the second thing. And third thing, which is also not to be underestimated, is that they have access to the internal job openings usually in the company. And this is one of sometimes this can make a major difference, because not all the job openings in a company are published externally.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
but
true.
but also looking at it from the HR recruiter point of view, I think a candidate who's already in the company and who is a certain expert in a certain field, I think there would be no better candidate than to hire this candidate, or to give a first preference to this candidate. So from that point of view, I think chances are really very high of landing a permanent position in the same organization. At least in my experience, I have seen most of my peers continuing their job in the same company, many times even in the same team after their PhD. In my specific case, for example, I have been in the same team since I started my PhD, which means I did not have to even move to a different desk
That's nice.
after my PhD. Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense, right? For someone who wants to hire a new person into the company, it makes sense to hire someone who they are already familiar with. And on the other hand, for the candidate also, if they are looking for a good job, they already know, okay, I have this option and I know how things work in this company. So it's good for both the sides.
Yes.
Yeah. But are there other career options also that maybe one should consider in your view?
Yeah, yeah. So normally, after a PhD in a, let's say, certain industrial topic, right? So normally there are also other companies working on similar topics, right? So this means the candidates could also be potentially attractive to other companies who are working on the same, let's say, technology or in the similar area of expertise or application. So from that point of view, I think the candidates would also be or would stand a high chance in getting recruited at competitor companies.
Okay, yeah, that's true
And
as well.
the job roles could be, for example, something like a development expert, or a technical lead, or even a manager. So this is really depending on the candidate, but also not completely impossible is to have a career in academics after an industrial PhD, because I've seen at least a couple of examples of this happening. So it's not really impossible. So if one is really keen to go into academics, I think it is possible.
Okay.
But I would say the easiest and let's say more reasonable option is to continue in industry after an industrial PhD.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And within academic PhD, usually I know that I'm free to take as much time as I want, like theoretically. Uh, but of course, my money, the funding runs out after usually 3 years, 4 years or so. Um, and then I need to always try to get more funding through projects or scholarships or whatever. How does it work in industrial PhD? So
Yeah.
do I have like a fixed time frame to finish the PhD?
Yeah, so this depends really on the company and might vary from case to case also within a given company. But usually, candidates might be given 3 to 4 years for a PhD. But I think if the candidate is not doing, or if the candidate is doing reasonable work, I think it's not really difficult to extend this contract. I think the companies are normally supportive to extend this, because in the end, when the candidate concludes his or her work, her research work, then I think this is beneficial not just for the candidate but also for the company. So from that point of view, normally industries are highly supportive of also extending the contract in case this can be justified. But I would say in academics you were right. So typically 3 to 5 years is uh, a typical, let's say, time needed for PhD. So in the academics side, maybe at least in case of structured programs, this is more on the lower limit. So this is close to 3 years typically. And in the industry, because it's an individual PhD, and because a lot of times the candidate might also have to do some work which is other than the PhD research work, it's easy to have it, let's say, extended. So normally in industry, it could take up to 5 years to complete a PhD.
All right. Okay. Okay. That's good to know.
Yes, but extending a contract or extending the tenure, this is not really a challenge. I think this is fine.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ajay. It's a lot of very useful information. Thanks a lot for speaking with us. And I hope next time we will speak about how to apply for an industrial PhD and how to find the right industrial PhD.
Yes, thanks a lot, Paras, also for having me here. It was my pleasure to share my thoughts and experiences, and I look forward to the next session.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all, folks. Thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe to our podcast and check out our blog on indiatogermany.com. See you in the next episode.